The mountains lay vast and cold beneath a sky washed pale with morning frost, and every tree stood like a silent witness to the slow fading heartbeat of the pack leader's cub. The pack moved through the white drifts with heavy steps, each wolf feeling the weight of fear pressing against their ribs like unseen ice. The cub rested weak and unmoving in the pack leader's gentle hold, its small body trembling with each thin breath, struggling to stay within this world just a little longer. The leader kept his head low, throat tight from nights without rest, hearing only the faint sound of snow breaking beneath his paws as the forest grew still around him. A cold wind bit into his fur, yet he ignored the sting, focusing instead on the fragile life pressed to his chest. The wolves followed close together, eyes shining with worry, ears flicking to each sound in the distance, as though danger itself could come from any direction and take what remained of their hope. The leader stopped near the edge of a frozen river, its surface gleaming like cracked glass beneath weak sun. He placed the cub in a nest of dried pine and old leaves collected by packmates who worked quickly and without hesitation. Their breath rose like smoke in the air, mingling with the sharp scent of winter, hunger and fear, but also loyalty, a bond that held them united when nature sought to break them. The smallest wolves nosed at the cub, trying to share warmth, but the cub could not respond, eyes barely open. Its life flickered softer than a dying ember, and each wolf felt the sting of helplessness as time slipped like water between their paws. Still they stayed close, pressing bodies together, forming a living wall to guard their tiny heart of the pack. Leader stood strong above them, though inside he crumbled like brittle bark beneath a storm. He remembered brighter days when the cub chased snowflakes and tumbled through grass with endless joy. And now that memory clung to him like thorns. He refused to surrender. He looked toward the endless stretch of mountains, seeking hope in the vast horizon, lit faintly by rising sun. A sound drifted from far across the valley, a distant echo of wind or perhaps something more, and the leader felt instinct stir like fire beneath ice. Something awaited beyond the ridge, maybe salvation, maybe nothing, but he did not care. Hope was thin, yet it burned, and he turned his gaze forward with silent promise that he would fight against death itself for the cub, whose life meant more than breath to them. All the sun climbed higher, casting pale gold light across the snow, yet warmth did not reach the cub, whose breaths came shallow like whispers of a fading dream. The wolves circled closer, forming a wall of fur and heart around their youngest member, their tails still and their ears pressed back with quiet dread. The pack leader lowered his muzzle to the cub, feeling its fragile heartbeat against the cold earth, and fear tightened inside him like winter iron, for he knew that sickness took the weak quickly, and often without mercy. Still, he could not turn away. He nuzzled the tiny form gently, as though hoping his touch alone could lend strength, but the cub stirred only faintly, its coat dull where it once shimmered with bright promise of youth. The pack searched the snow for roots and bark that might warm the cub inside, yet the land lay barren and unforgiving, as if winter itself had chosen to test them. The older wolves returned, carrying scraps of food, small and scarce, and still they laid it before the cub, with desperate faith that nourishment might coax life to remain. Meanwhile, the youngest wolves whimpered softly, their eyes wide with fear of losing one so small and beloved. Their sorrow pooled in the air, heavy as storm clouds waiting to break. The leader watched each moment slip by like falling snowflakes, countless, fragile, and impossible to hold. He remembered stories of healers and herbs of cures found in nature long ago, before humans vanished from these mountains. He remembered the medic who once moved among the wolves without fear, a strange friend in a world that rarely welcomed such bonds. That memory pushed through his despair like green sprout through ice, and he lifted his gaze to the distant ridge where valleys stretched wide with possibility. There might yet be hope, carried on wind or footsteps unseen, a chance that the cub's light need not fade away forever. The pack leader stood at the river's edge, and memories unfolded like shadows across fresh snow. He recalled the human medic who once knelt among wolves with steady hands, healing a wounded hunter with herbs no wolf had seen before. The scent of strange leaves and bitter roots lingered in his mind like ghost smoke, refusing to fade. The leader had watched that human, once gentle and fearless, moving through the forest as though born of mountain wind and earth itself. A rare bond had formed between them, a bridge of trust that neither growl nor fear could break, though time had carried the medic far beyond these frozen ridges. Yet now, as the cub lay weak beneath pale light, the leader felt that memory rise like a call of instinct, urging him to believe that help might return if the mountains willed it. His golden eyes scanned the distant peaks where wind carved deep paths through blue shadows. Perhaps the medic still walked this world, perhaps Knowledge and forgotten cures still flowed through human hands, and if fate guided footsteps true, then salvation might not be lost. The leader raised his head and released a howl, long and aching, a voice woven of hope, fear, and unspoken plea. It echoed across valleys, through pine and ice, into far beyond where no wolf could see. Pack listened, breath held as the final note faded, and silence returned heavy and waiting. Something had been set in motion, something carried by wind and memory and trust, not yet broken. Years before, the medic had walked these same mountains with calm eyes and open hands, offering help where nature struck hardest. He had treated wounds, mended broken bones, and shared food through cold seasons, when prey was scarce and winter bit deep into hungry ribs. The wolves had watched him with wary curiosity, yet slowly trust grew like moss between stone. They learned his scent, his soft footsteps, his quiet voice that soothed even the fiercest growls. It was a rare peace between species, one built on respect rather than fear. But the villagers in the lowlands did not share that peace. They saw wolves as monsters, shadows that stole livestock and haunted the night, and they saw a man who treated beasts instead of hunting them. A traitor, they called him, and with torches in hand they drove him from the valley. His cabin burned, his tools scattered, his knowledge nearly buried beneath ashes and snow. The medic walked away, not with anger, but with sorrow, heavy as mountains, and wolves watched from the trees, knowing a good thing had been stolen from the world still. Rumor claimed he lived somewhere beyond the high peaks, a wanderer with skill and wisdom forgotten by most. The pack leader remembered this as the cub faded beside him, and the memory sharpened. Like claws of hope, if humans could banish one healer, perhaps the mountains could guide him home once more. For life still lingered, unsure yet refusing to fall into darkness. Fully done, bled slowly across the sky, smearing pale gold across frozen ridges, and the world felt as if it held one long breath, waiting for fate to move. The cub lay still, yet its tiny chest lifted in weak shallow rhythm like a candle flame fighting against wind. The pack leader hovered close, eyes sharp but filled with fear that trembled beneath his fur, and every wolf waited for a sign, any change, even the slightest twitch that might say life had not yet slipped beyond reach. Then the leader lifted his head and released another call, though softer than before, more plea than roar. His voice flowed across valleys, over jagged stone, and through bare forests like a thread of fragile hope, searching for ears willing to hear. The wolves joined him, one by one, their voices weaving sorrow, strength, and desperate faith into the morning air, a chorus of need that reached far beyond, where paws could travel. Somewhere past the peaks, a figure stirred, a human worn by travel and time, paused on a high path, hearing the distant cries carried by cold wind that tugged at memory. He felt recognition like warm flame in old ashes, and without hesitation, he turned toward the sound as though the mountains themselves summoned him home, and healing waited ahead. The medic descended the mountain path with slow, determined steps, his boots deep in snow and breaths rising like steam into the cold morning air. His satchel hung heavy against his side, filled with herbs, old remedies, and knowledge carried through years of wandering far from any hearth or village. He had not meant to return to these lands where fires once drove him away, where voices full of fear and anger forced him into exile. Yet the echoes of wolves had reached him, calling through memory, and through mountains, awakening something he believed long buried, a purpose perhaps, or a debt he never stopped feeling. He paused beneath a pine tree, its branches heavy with frost, and touched the leather pouch, singed at his belt. Within it lay roots dried with care, leaves that held slow healing power, powders ground from bitter plants found only in wild, remote places. Remedies forgotten by most humans who now trusted only steel and hospitals and things the earth did not grow. But the Magnetic believed in the old ways taught by an elder long past, that life could be called back if one tried and listened to what nature whispered. He inhaled deeply, letting frost sting his lungs and the scent of distant wolves stir his heart, until he moved again, more swiftly now, guided by instinct rather than direction. The trail was steep, but his body remembered how to climb, how to move through snow without wasting energy, how to follow wind that carried faint scents of fur and fear. He saw tracks, wolves, many of them paw prints pressed deep. The leader, heavier, larger, easily recognized even after all these winters. Strangely, he felt no fear, only urgency and something close to hope. He followed until he reached a ridge where he could see the valley below, white, vast, silent except for the sound of water running slow beneath a sheet of ice. And there, in that silence, he imagined the cub, small, fragile, struggling against sickness while the pack waited powerless, tense hearts aching for help no pause could give. The medic started down the slope faster, almost running now, though snow dragged at his feet. He slipped once, caught himself, and continued, driven by the feeling that time was thin, that breath was fading, and that every moment mattered. He whispered to himself, not prayer but promise, that he would reach them, that he would try with all knowledge he carried, that forgotten cures might still shine like embers in winter dark if placed in the right hands at the right moment. Alive with belief, the medic stepped into the clearing, snow crunching softly beneath his boots, and the wolves froze like shadows carved from ice. Every muscle coiled, ready to strike, yet hesitant as the scent of the human reached them. The pack leader stepped forward, ears low, eyes scanning every inch of the stranger who moved slowly, hands empty yet steady as he approached the cub whose chest rose shallow and weak. The air was tense, every breath carried fear and hope, mingled as though the forest itself held its silence, waiting for the first move. A medic knelt in the snow, keeping his eyes level with the cub, heart open and still calm despite the wary growls circling him. He removed herbs from his satchel, crushed leaves between his palms, releasing bitter earthy scent, and murmured quietly as though speaking to the wind and the pack at once. Each wolf watched every movement, sniffing the air, deciding whether this human brought danger or salvation. The leader lowered his head slowly, signaling trust, though muscles remained taut with caution. With practiced care, the medic touched the cub, warming cold fur with steady hands, pressing gently where sickness burned beneath soft skin. He laid poultices made of dried roots and herbs over wounds, applying pressure with patience and reverence, as if the life of the cub was a fragile crystal he must protect. Each wolf moved closer, nudging Snow aside, offering warmth and body. While watching the healer work, the cub stirred. Faintly, a small whimper escaped, and the leader exhaled a deep rumble, almost a sigh of relief, though eyes remained vigilant. Time seemed to stretch with no sound except wind over ice, the rustle of fur, and whispered words of the medic as night approached. Slowly falling behind distant mountains, the pack had accepted the presence of this human, at least for this moment, understanding that he carried something beyond their grasp, something that might pull the cub back from the edge of death itself. And the medic did not look up, only continued his work, steady hands, steady heart, steady belief. A cub twitched softly as the medic applied the final layer of herbs, wrapping it carefully in woven cloths, the scent of bitter roots, strong yet oddly comforting in the cold. Clearing, the pack pressed closer, forming a protective circle around the human and the small life. He cradled each wolf body, warm and eyes intent as if lending strength. With presence alone, the leader nuzzled the medic once, his breath steaming in the freezing air, a silent gesture of gratitude and trust that spoke louder than growls could ever convey. The medic murmured quietly to the cub, softly repeating words he had learned from elders, words that carried the rhythm of life and patience. He pressed palms gently against the tiny chest, feeling heartbeat fluttering, uncertain at first, then slowly gaining rhythm, like fragile wind filling sails. The pack watched intently, every twitch, every breath, as if time had slowed to a heartbeat shared among all of them together. They waited, not daring to move or speak too loudly, for fear of disturbing fragile life reborn. The wind shifted through the trees, carrying faint scent of pine and snow, and the medic inhaled deep, steadying himself while continuing to monitor every response of the cub. His eyes met the pack leader's for a long moment, and they shared something unspoken, a bond forged through worry, hope, and survival. The cub's eyes flickered, opening slightly, revealing bright pupils, searching the cold world for warmth and reassurance. The wolves growled low, softly, as if acknowledging the miracle unfolding before them. Night fell slowly over the clearing, but the light of hope burned brighter than any stars. The cub's breathing strengthened and the pack circled tighter, each wolf leaning into the other, as though their presence alone could protect. The fragile spark of life now returned. The medic remained, kneeling, patient, vigilant, and unwavering, a living bridge between human knowledge and wild instinct, guiding the cub back from the edge of death into the warmth of family and trust. On broke slowly over the mountains, painting pale gold across the snow, and the cub stirred beneath the medic's hands, its chest rising with steady breaths, no longer shallow but gaining strength with each passing moment. The pack leader stepped close, nuzzling the cub gently, his eyes bright with relief, and something deeper, pride and gratitude, rolled through him like warmth in frozen blood. The wolves around formed a tighter circle, each one pressing close to the cub and the human, their presence a silent promise that no harm would come. While life had returned to fragile form, the medic smiled softly, placing his hands lightly on the cub's head, feeling fur warm beneath fingers that had worked through night and cold, his heart steady with quiet satisfaction. He looked up at the pack leader, and in that gaze was recognition, acceptance, and a bond that needed no words. The wolves had allowed him to heal what only he could heal, and in return, he respected the strength of their world, and the sacred trust of life that had been granted back to them. The cub blinked open eyes full of curiosity, and new energy, weak legs shaking but ready to try the world again. The younger wolves sniffed and nuzzled the cub, encouraging movement and warmth, and the older wolves circled with eyes sharp yet soft with relief. The leader stayed close, gently brushing muzzle over the cub as though passing courage and warning to all who might challenge them. The medic rose slowly, his pack of remedies empty but his heart full. He stepped back and watched the wolves and their small, bright spark of life. Together in the pale morning light, a howl rose from the pack leader, echoing across valleys, crisp, cold mountains, and the human lifted head in return, a sound of unity, hope, and survival intertwining across species and distance. The cub took first, wobbly steps, leaning against its father, and the pack moved with him, surrounding warmth, and life returned. The medic turned slowly, knowing he had done all he could, and the mountains whispered back acceptance and gratitude as life continued, and bonds endured beyond fear, beyond winter, beyond the edge of death itself.